Hi there, folks. In this video, I'm going to introduce you to another tool that I call conflict processing. Now, this is another way to process your emotions and to be able to understand what you're thinking, what you're feeling a little bit better so that you can engage a little bit more in the emotional self-care work that helps with your just own mental health. And so definitely this is one of the tools that I recommend that my clients go through. It definitely helps a great deal when it comes to dealing with relationships and conflicts in relationships. The thing here is that most other emotional processing tools require you to just kind of sit down and just kind of think through what you're feeling, getting in touch with what you're feeling. If you've listened to one of my other videos before, I went through what's called the SPADE tool, which is a hygienic exercise that allows you to kind of sit and create some space to really dig into your emotions and understand what you're thinking and feeling. It's a more of a proactive exercise. This particular tool is a little bit different in that it's a little bit more reactive, meaning if you have a conflict that comes up, it allows you an opportunity to dig into what you're thinking and feeling through the window of a conflict. And so really the way this works is that any conflict that you might experience, whether it's a conflict with your spouse or with a loved one, with a parent or whatever, or even if it's a conflict within yourself, if you're having issues with yourself, for example, any kind of conflict is an opportunity, it's a window to really dig into understanding what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, and in the process, discover and resolve some issues that are going on within yourself. So this is a great processing tool that I definitely recommend for all my clients, particularly when it comes to dealing with relationships. So let me break down the way the tool works for you really quick. It's basically a three-step process. Any conflict can be broken down into three separate components: a behavior, a thought, and a feeling. So I call this the BTF tool. It basically asks you to evaluate what's going on in a conflict and to divide it up into these three different sections. So the way it works is any conflict starts with a trigger. There's something that kind of sparks and starts the conflict for you. That's always going to be the behavior or the triggering event. So when something happens, it starts a conflict for you. The idea here is that if you can identify first what the trigger is and what the behavior is, then you ask yourself, okay, well, when that happens, when this trigger happens, or when this behavior happens, there's a thought that comes along with that too. There's a thought that's associated with that. So when something happens, I think this. And so that would be the thought. If you can break out from that behavior what the underlying thought or the connected thought is, it's the second part of the process. And then the third part is the feeling. And that's being able to identify what the emotion, the connected emotion is behind it as well. So if you can break down any conflict into a behavior, thought, and feeling. So the way the structure would look like is when the behavior happens, or when the trigger happens, I think that thought, which makes me feel that emotion. Now, the key thing here is if you remember from one of my other videos, I described to you the difference between a primary and secondary emotion. And what you want to do here is make sure that if you're going to put a feeling here, you're going to identify a feeling in this particular section, that it's a secondary emotion, that it's not just simply a primary emotion that's anger or fear, that you're able to dig down a little bit further and get a little bit more pinpointed, more precise emotion, something along the lines of I feel neglected, or I feel not enough, or I feel guilt, something along those lines that will help to really articulate a little bit more with precision what it is that you're feeling. So the key thing here is if you can break up any kind of conflict into these three components, the research tells us that you're able to probably resolve that conflict a lot more likely if you can identify those three different things. So a good example here would be something like when my spouse forgets to pick up after themselves around the house or do their laundry, something along those lines. The trigger behavior that starts a conflict for you when they do this, I think that that my time is not as valued, or my contribution to the family is not as valuable, or that I think that they disrespect what it is that I do, which makes me feel neglected or less than, or like they're more valuable, or their time is more valuable than my own, something along those lines. It could be different for everybody, but the point is that everyone might have a certain trigger. It could go a few different ways in terms of what the associated thought is and the corresponding feeling. Whatever that may be, as long as you can identify these three different components in any particular trigger, you're a lot further along in terms of being able to process what you feel, why you feel it, and what you think and why you think it. Whenever you can break out any conflict into these three components, you stand a much better chance at being able to get to resolution, not just within yourself and being able to resolve what you're thinking and feeling, but you're also able to resolve with the person you're having a conflict with, which is, again, a huge plus in terms of just the reason why you want to do a process like this. So again, a little bit different from a traditional process in terms of just sitting down and doing some of the work that I described in another video called the SPADE work, where you're sitting down and really digging into just what you're feeling, doing an inventory for the day. This one starts with a triggering event of a conflict. So if you go through an inventory in a day and just say, hey, what really upset me today? What were the key trigger points of conflict for me today? And go through the BTF process to break out what the trigger was, what the connecting thought and what the connecting feeling was. That helps with the processing work and doing some of the hygienic work that we're talking about as it relates to good emotional and mental health care. So again, use this tool, keep it in your toolbox. Make sure you can use it in your normal cadence. Again, if you want to use that in your spade tool where you're kind of sitting down and really digging into just what's going on in a day, you can use the BTF tool to help facilitate that process as well. So again, I hope that helps, and I'll see you guys in the next video.